it's very, very difficult to get through that amount of rock, concrete, and the like, then the risk here is that America has taken a huge amount of risk but had no benefit from it. And therefore, you'd imagine that once that battle damage assessment has been done, if the Fordo target has not been destroyed, then that leaves America in a bit of a predicament, because either it leaves the facility there, because bluntly, the Iranians will just sweep away, clear all the rocks away from the entrance halls and then can get up and running again, or they actually do an embark on a slightly longer campaign.
I mean, the scale of what we now know is Operation Midnight Hammer is quite jaw-dropping. We've had deception there. We've had bombers flying in the wrong direction, trying to get the attention of the world, whilst a whole load of aircraft, 125 we were told have been involved, flew completely undetected to reach their targets in Iran.
Yes, it just goes to show we've been focused the last couple of days on these massive ordnance penetrators, these GBU-57 bombs, but there is so much more to air power than simply the bombers. You have the fighters out the front doing all sorts of measures to suppress the enemy air defences. You've got stealth in there. And I think some of the stats that come out are quite extraordinary. The B-2 bombers clearly are still on their way home. They talked about this being one of the longest flights that the B2 ever done, 2 crew on board. They'll have to have been one of them sleeping at any one time, but quite incredible. And also, if you look at the numbers now, 7 B2s were involved in this raid. I believe the United States Air Force only had 21 built, 19 are actually available. They've lost 2 over the years. So this was a significant proportion of that fleet, each delivering 2 of these massive ordnance penetrators. I think the one question I have really, though, remains around this battle damage assessment. These bombs, to my knowledge, have not been used in anger before. The site at Fordo, it's very deep, it's a lot of rock, etc., and stone there, as well as concrete. And battle damage assessment, when I've been involved in operations, that tends to take quite a while, because you can only see the outside and you have to do a lot of analysis to work out whether you've actually achieved your objective. But regardless, this was a very major strike.
Yeah, we're talking about these massive ordnance penetrator bombs, or MOPs as they've been referred to. We think they have a penetration capability of up to 60 feet, but that depends on whether you're dealing with rock or cement. And we were told in that press conference by General Kane that 14 of those were dropped on 2 targets. Some people speculating that those bombs were doubling up to get even more penetration on those nuclear facilities that are buried deep underground. Michael, we heard from the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth that this is not an open-ended engagement. He kept repeating when he was asked by the members of the press that this was a very specific mission. This was to take out the nuclear capabilities of Iran, and it was not the US getting embroiled in another one of those open-ended conflicts around the globe. What did you make of his comments?
Yeah, no, I think that one of the most striking pieces of this is it's one of the most dramatic military actions that we've seen the United States take in a number of years, and yet in some ways it was designed not so much as solely as a military objective, but rather to kind of push Iran into the capitulation that Donald Trump has been demanding now for weeks and even months. The Iranians are casting this today as a betrayal by the United States of diplomatic talks that have been going on off and on for the last couple of months. The way President Trump, and I think the military folks that everybody just listened to would describe it, is rather as an exclamation or a demonstration that the president was serious, and that the hope would be that this doesn't spin out of control into a back and forth that goes on for the next weeks and months, but rather the Iranians conclude that the president is serious and that they, for the survival of their regime, need to not only come to the table, but come to the table with a willingness to do the things that President Trump and Israel want, which is a complete abandonment of all enrichment of nuclear material, a complete abandonment of their nuclear ambitions. And, should they decide in the face of this powerful demonstration that is the best path. And I suspect the administration, Mr. Hegseth, Mr. Trump, will all hail it as a big success.
Sean, do you expect Iran to come back to the negotiating table? We heard earlier from the Iranian foreign minister saying, how can Iran return to the negotiating table when it never left? Iran trying to make the point that you can't bomb people to negotiations, but perhaps Donald Trump thinks otherwise.
Well, I think it's very difficult to see them returning to the negotiating table until the dusters settle on this, and probably they will want to have the final say militarily. The question is whether that's a major display of petulance or whether they do something minor. But the reason I return back to this business about whether or not the bombs have actually had the desired effect is if they haven't actually got through at Fordo, and bluntly, it's very, very difficult to get through that amount of rock, concrete and the like, then the risk here is that America has taken a huge amount of risk but had no benefit from it. And therefore, you'd imagine that once that battle damage assessment has been done, if the Fordo target has not been destroyed, then that leaves America in a bit of a predicament, because either it leaves the facility there, because bluntly the Iranians will just sweep away, clear all the rocks away from the entrance halls and then can get up and running again, or they actually do and embark on a slightly longer campaign. And as I say, I'm not trying to second guess the US, but I know in the Gulf War we had a great deal of difficulty. We knew we were plugging away at the hardened aircraft shelters where the Iraqi fighters were hidden, but we couldn't see inside their bunkers. We couldn't work out whether the aircraft had been destroyed, whether the bombs had gone right through, or actually had impacted and blown up on the surface. So that will be one of the big problems in this. And I think my final comment on it is that this was an amazing display of American prowess, technology, multi-spectrum activity. But the tip of the sword was simply a very, very big bomb. You need a big hammer to knock in a big nail, and it appears that this was the only bomb in the world that could be delivered that had the potential to take out this Fordo site. We'll be interested to see in the coming days whether America was successful.
Well, General Kane at that briefing said that the BDA, the so-called battle damage assessment, is going to take some time. And Sean, before we go, how do we get that accurate information? Because, of course, being on the ground, the Iranians are already saying, it's not as much damage as the US are purporting it to be. How do we get that accurate information to know the state of the nuclear facilities that we hit?
I mean, ultimately, you have to go in and you have to look around to see whether it has been destroyed or not. Battle damage assessment, though, is not just visual, it's also electronic. Are you hearing the same information flowing, the same radio signals, the same communication? Electronically, are there other radar signatures, thermal signatures? For example, if there are heating vents and ducts coming out, are they still warming up? But it does take some time before you work out these facilities, and it's so important given the effort that America's got to, and also the risk that it is taken doing this. It'll be really important for them to find out just whether this is a minor dust-off for the Iranians, and within a year they'll have it all up and running again, or whether this really has taken that facility back to the Stone Age.